Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Expertise Podcast. I'm your host, Roland Martin, and I hope that today's conversation will expand your knowledge. Today I welcome Sheri Yutzy to the show. Sheri is an author who writes short fiction, which she publishes on her Instagram or on her website and probably some other places as well. But she also has written a novel and is working on another novel that she hopes to get published in the future. This is another episode where I met my guest for the first time in doing the podcast, and I really enjoyed my conversation with Sheri. It was interesting to hear her writing, her experience, how she's grown in the writing process, kind of how she started in it, and how she's developed along the way. And it was also really interesting to hear some of the ideas that she has for stories, her talking about her stories, some of the stories she's written a little bit as well. And I really enjoyed the part of the conversation too, where we talked about creativity and how we were made to be creative and how that's really showing who we are as we're made in God's image. I ran into a few technical difficulties in recording and putting together this episode. I think for the most part the sound turned out okay. And I think it'll be quite easy to listen to, but there might be a few places where one of us comes through just a little bit quiet, but I tried to limit those to places where that part of the conversation doesn't matter quite as much. I hope that you will enjoy it and learn from her expertise. Welcome, Sheri, to the Everyday Expertise Podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you this morning.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So tell me, what keeps you busy currently, or what's your life like at the moment?
Well, I have two toddlers, so my daughter is turning 3 on Saturday, and my little boy is a year and a half, so okay. I'm often running after them.
Nice, yeah. Well, it sounds like he's really similar in age to my son then, so yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, they play together pretty well, but there's a lot of training that goes on.
yeah, I'm sure.
But we also have an Airbnb apartment attached to our house here, so I clean that and keep after the guests, help them if they need anything. So that's kind of my job.
Excellent. Is that do you often have people, like, more than half the time, would you say you've guessed, or how often is someone staying there? It's
usually just weekends.
Okay.
Like we have people here 2 weekends this month, and we
okay.
had someone there more like 4 days last month. We have people coming through that are guys that are working in the area often, and so it's just a one-room apartment, so with a bathroom, so it works pretty well for them.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic, and I always think it's really neat the way that something like Airbnb has opened up the opportunity for someone like you to be able to have guests and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's great. Anything else that you wanted to share there before we get into some of your specific projects?
Yeah, I think that's the main things that keep me busy besides the writing.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your writing, some of the projects that you're involved in and work in, or different organizations or that kind of thing, or different writing projects that you have. So yeah, what are some of those?
Well, my main writing project is I'm working on a young adult fantasy novel. It's called The Secret Cellar. So I'm polishing it right now.
Yeah, just sorry to interrupt there. But what's the spelling of cellar?
Seller, just like Seller.
Okay, so one who sells?
Yes, it has a kind of an underground market called the Night Bazaar, and there's magical wares at each stall, and there's a gem seller, a wine seller, a lace seller, and all those things, and then there's the secret seller who he's kind of hidden in the back, and he manipulates the entire city. It's based on Bardia, which is an island city, and he's trying to brainwash the entire city. And the main character, Belle, she is a scent maker, So she can grow flowers that they have a magical scent. And the scents do different things. Like one does healing, and one makes the wearer beautiful for an hour, and just different things like that. So she makes the scents, and then she learns that the secret seller is he's trying to get someone to, he's trying to capture her to get her to make a scent that will brainwash everybody. And so she escapes him, and then she has to come up with a cure for his brainwashing scent.
Okay. Well, that sounds fascinating. And yeah, that's like one of the things that I love about fantasy novels or reading fantasy novels is just the creativity that goes into putting the story together, and then so yeah, just hearing you talk about it just gets me excited about hearing about a story like that, and thinking about the possibilities for what's going on in that world, and what the conflicts that they need to deal with, and things like that. So yeah, just that little description there is great. And I'll probably, just to give you a warning, I'll probably have some more questions about kind of how you come up with the story and develop it and things like that, maybe a little bit later on. But that's great just to hear a little bit of a synopsis there of the story. So where are you in that writing process, or where is that book along in the process?
I'm in I'm headed toward the polishing stage. I'm hoping to get it done in a month or so. It's taking a while. Longer than I thought, of course. Okay. But so I'm fixing plot holes mostly, and making sure everything's logical. I had to add a bunch of scenes because it wasn't quite as it needed to be more complex. So I'm getting close to having the word count that I want, though, and then I just need to go through and make sure there's no big mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Is this your first time doing a novel, or is this like a largest work that you've done, or have you done other ones as well?
It's my second novel. I wrote one kind of over several years. I think I started when I was 14 in a notebook, and then that was my first project, and I finished that, and then I sent it out. I was querying it, looking for an agent before I got married, so that'd be like 5 years ago. And I sent it out like 3 or 4 times and got a lot of rejections. And I found an agent that I really want. And so I'm going to query him again. I've talked to him in person, and he said he doesn't mind if I send it again, as long as I'm improving each time. But I decided to just lay that other novel aside because it had some major structural issues, I think, or I needed to learn more, basically. And I had been advised, different writers have told me that sometimes you just need to lay the first one aside and just write another one, and you'll learn a lot from writing another one.
Okay, yeah. So and I've kind of heard this from maybe interviews with other authors or that kind of thing, that it is a lot of, it's a lot of work to write a novel, I'm guessing, but it's also a lot of work to get it published and try to find someone to work with you and that kind of thing. Have you found that to be the case from what you've been describing?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's a growing process. I'm glad that it is so hard, because I know I would not have wanted them to publish what I sent in 5 years ago. Like that's not who I want to be as an author. I didn't know it at the time, but now I can see huge mistakes in it, or just like bad writing or whatever it was. And so I'm glad that they're such strong gatekeepers. But I think it's just really it's easy for people to. It's popular, I guess, to write a novel, I think, or to want to anyway. So a lot of people try these days, like more than it was, I don't know, decades ago. And so there's also online publishing and that kind of thing. And so the publishing market has changed, and I think they're really, there's just a lot of competition, basically.
Yeah. And so it's maybe even more difficult to get published than it would have been a number of years ago.
It seems like it, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there's more people reading novels too, and so maybe they want to publish more. I don't know if how that's changed in relation to the amount of people that are trying to get published. So that's it's interesting to think about.
I should
Yeah, I might. Go
I,
ahead.
I should say it's hard to get traditionally published, but there's a lot of you can publish self-publish or even
Right.
like hybrid or indie publishing, which would be there are publishers who will you pay them to publish your book, or they'll just give you kind of minimal support while you
Okay.
as you publish it. Like you have to do all the marketing yourself and that kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
thing.
So there's pros and cons to both of those models, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I've pursued traditional publishing because, well, I'll probably talk about it later, but because of where I want to go with my books. Like, you can't. It's hard to get into like big bookstores and those kinds of things if you don't have a publisher that they respect, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, fascinating. Yeah, I'll have more questions for you, kind of on that whole getting a novel from the beginning to from an idea into the final form. So yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Maybe just on still on writing. Do you do other types of writing and or other smaller projects along with it, or have you been pretty much focused on your novels for the last while?
I do. I like to kind of stretch my skills as I
Hmm.
can. So I write for Daughters of Promise. Sometimes I pitch to them most times when they have a week for each issue when they're open for pitches, and then you send in your ideas.
Okay.
So yeah, I wrote one for their I think it's their spring issue,
Okay.
and it's actually a tutorial on writing
Oh,
flash fiction, which I write a lot of
okay.
flash fiction. So flash fiction is like a short story, so it's usually under 1,000 words, and I really
Okay.
enjoy writing that, and so I thought, well, I should write a tutorial about it.
Okay.
So that's another kind of writing that I do. I try to write a flash fiction every Friday, and I post it on Instagram, and then also on my
Oh,
website. I'm part of there's another author I know who she posts a prompt every Friday, and so
okay.
I that just kind of keeps me limber.
Yeah, that's great. So just maybe just a short description. What is Daughters of Promise? Or you mentioned it. It's a magazine. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's an Anabaptist women's magazine.
Hmm.
It's run by Anabaptist women,
Hmm.
and I think they started it to make a platform for women who
Hmm.
yeah wanted a place to write, and it's a really I love the organization. Have worked with them before, and I think they do a really good job. They have art and photographs and recipes, and then all kinds of articles, inspirational or how-to or personal stories, just all kinds of
Hmm.
things. So
Yeah, my wife has subscribed in the past. Don't think she is currently, but we have a few of the hard copies of the magazine at our place, and I just every time I see it, I'm struck by how good it looks. I just am really impressed with how well put together it is, and yeah, I think they do a good job with that too. Yeah, anything else you wanted to talk about there on your writing projects or other things?
well, one other thing that's taking some time right now is I work for Spark Flash Fiction, which is
Okay.
that's where it's an online. It used to be print, but it changed hands, and so it went to online. It's a romance flash fiction magazine. Actually, it's Christian, but focused on
Hmm.
romance. And I wrote some stories for them in the past, and so I was kind of then
Hmm.
I saw they were looking for editors or several. They had several openings, and
Okay.
so I put my application in, I guess. So now I'm the acquisitions editor, which I
Okay.
really enjoy that because it doesn't take very much work. I just read
Okay.
I read the submissions as they come in for each issue, and just basically I number the ones. I collect about 10. They publish about eight or nine every issue, and
Okay.
so then
Okay.
I just find the ones that I think will work. And
Hmm.
so I don't have to actually edit them, but I get to read them and see what people are submitting, and it gets me excited about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we're kind of a team, so we chat a lot, me and the other editors and the other people on the team, and we have a social media manager and that kind of thing. So I was excited about that because it is good. It's good practice for me, and it's good exposure, I guess. Like I've met some other authors through it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how that would be really helpful to have the networking and also to be, is it really helpful to be always connecting with what other people are writing for your ideas and things like that? Or would you say that that plays into your writing at all?
yeah, I think it is. It is helpful. It helps me to see, especially if I'm looking at it as a kind of critically, then I can see, the problems in their writing, and then I think about it connecting to my own. I think
Oh, yeah.
it's a good. I really enjoy editing and proofreading and that kind of thing. So I'll probably always be dabbling in it somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's great. Thanks for sharing those things. Maybe before we get a little bit into your story and how the your love for writing developed and that kind of thing, I'm always interested in kind of hearing a few other things about my guests. So, do you have any other hobbies or interests outside of your writing that you'd like to share with us?
Um, yeah, I love in the winter, especially. I like to crochet. It's
Oh,
something
neat.
kind of tactile that I can feel, and
Hmm.
it helps me to clear my mind. I think to do something just with my hands. Um,
Okay.
I actually crochet for my sister has an Etsy shop. It's called Sophia's Cozy Creations, and she
Okay.
makes things for toddlers and babies. So I just
Oh, neat.
do projects for her, like little things that she assigns me.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy that. In the spring and summer, I like to garden, and I
Hmm.
like mowing the lawn and doing things outside as much as I
Nice.
can.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
And of course, I read. I should say every other spare moment I'm reading.
Okay. Nice. How many books do you read in a year?
Um, I'm not sure.
Ballpark, like
I
roughly.
mean, I probably it depends what I'm reading because
Yeah.
I just read well, it's the Wheel of Time series. I don't know if you ever read it.
Okay.
It's Robert Jordan and then
I've
Brandon Sanderson
yeah,
at the
I'm
end.
partway through it.
Yeah,
I've read the first three, but it's taking me a
it,
while,
it
and I
takes
didn't get to the next one for a long time.
yeah, it takes a long time. I read those. There's 14 of them, I guess, and it
Hmm.
took me like 6 months. And
Wow.
I read a few books in between there because I needed a break, but they're so huge.
Yeah, I know.
And so that kind of, I think that actually cut down my reading for the year because they're
Yeah.
so fat that it would take me, yeah, a week to read one or something, and then I would take a break and yeah.
Okay, well, if you're reading one of those books in a week, then I kind of get a picture
I
of how
did
much you read.
sometimes, yeah. Not each one in a week, but sometimes I did, especially when toward the end it got very intense, so I
Okay,
didn't want to stop. But,
nice.
yeah.
That's excellent. All right. Yeah, well, maybe this talking about reading and things like that. So looking back to, are you able to kind of pick out where you first discovered your love for writing and where you knew that you wanted to be a writing, or yeah, kind of tell us how that developed.
Yeah, I I think I've loved reading and writing I mean, ever since I can remember. Like I remember
Hmm.
learning how to read, and the moment when I discovered I didn't have to read out loud. Like mom had just taught me. I homeschooled, so our mom
Okay.
homeschooled us, so we did. I had a lot of extra time to read. I think that helped
Hmm.
too. Um, and I would write little stories. Like I still have some notebooks. I don't even know how old I was, but I would try to come up with little stories from when I was
Okay.
very young. Um, and the more I read, I think the more I wanted to read. And I think I remember reading like the Chronicles of Narnia and thinking and just loving it. Like I loved
Hmm.
the fantasy, the different world, walking
Hmm.
through a wardrobe and like here's this whole new world, and that was just really, I think that probably sparked the desire to write something from in a different world, or at least our world interpreted differently.
Right. Yeah. So that was your first introduction to fantasy, or?
As far as I can remember, I think so. We had like a kind of a simplified children's version. It was just sort of a one big book, and it was really well illustrated, and I loved that. I sometimes I think the pictures almost did as much for me as the words when I was that young.
Interesting. Yeah. 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 So was that the types of stories that you were writing when you were a child? Like to of
I
different worlds and that kind of
yeah,
thing?
I don't know that I wrote. I'm trying to remember if I wrote actual. I don't think I wrote actual fantasy when I was that young, because I don't know if I was reading that much. Like I read, Chronicles of Narnia, but then most of the other books were more like animal books or something like Black Beauty or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
I wrote stories about girls who lived in tree houses, and I remember reading the Swiss Family Robinson. I don't know if you ever read that. It's kind of like Robinson Crusoe, but they get stranded on an island, and I was just fascinated by that. So I wrote a story called The Pioneer Family. I don't think I ever finished it, but they went through much trouble.
Okay.
And that
Yeah.
was, I think I just kind of modeled whatever I was reading. I wanted to write like that.
Yeah, well, that actually that brings up another question. Would you still describe your writing somewhat like that as modeling other types of writing, or does there come a point where you would kind of step out on your own as not so much doing that?
I think I am learning to step out on my own more. But it is a lot of, like, I do need to read, I find that I do need to read good writing, or I lose my inspiration. Like, it's really tough. Became much more critical after I became a writer. I became more critical of other books not because they were such bad stories, but like if a story didn't grab me right away, or didn't, I could see the mistakes in it or something, then it felt like a drain. Like it was just, I'm not learning I felt like I wasn't really learning from it.
Okay. Yeah.
If I could see so many problems with it. I mean, I guess I could learn from seeing the mistakes and then trying not to make those in my own, but it was work. It's now work for me to read anything that's not like really well written.
Okay. Yeah. So you would find something that's well written to be a lot more inspiring than learning from the mistakes of a poorly written book or something like that.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, because I write young adult fantasy now. Trying to see where that is I think it's coming up here. I could talk about when I started wanting to write young adult fantasy specifically.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if it's because I read so much I started reading so much of it. I was really drawn to it. Well, okay, so fantasy, I think the first time I really wanted to write that way, I think was when I read Ted Dekker. I don't know if you ever read.
Okay. I've definitely heard of him, but I haven't read much of his. Yeah.
He has a very different style, I think. And when I discovered that, I think my brother had him or something like that, I was just really blown away by his, he has a circle, I guess it's a series now. I mean, I think he added a fourth book, so it's not a trilogy anymore. But that series just really, it's about a man who he goes into a dream world. Like when he dreams, he's in another world, and it just crazy things happen. And it was just, I think that really changed my view of books and even my view of God, because it's very the main character experiences God in both, or especially in the dream world, in a different way. And I was just astonished that. So I was like, oh, I could use fantasy to, I can experience God through fantasy in a totally different way, but it's still true to who God is. Like I think it made me learn to love God more, actually, because of the way that God was portrayed in those books. So Ted Dekker was like I mean, I don't want to say idol, but he was. I don't think he was my idol, but I admired him very much, and I bought all of his books like as soon as they came out, and I read them. And I still really admire him. I don't want to write. He's writing more for adults, and my style is different. Like I've begun to separate from him, from that, but I still link him to inspiring me to make stories that help people experience truth in different ways.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And yeah, I think I don't know much about this, or maybe it's more just from experience, my own experience, but I think that imagination and the creativity that you're talking about there, but I guess yeah, more imagination maybe when we're reading novels and that kind of thing is so powerful for helping to shape us and teach us things, and so that's fascinating to think about when you're talking about the effect that reading his books had on you, and yeah, how it changes our perception of God, or makes it more real to us, and that kind of thing. Um, Maybe just for clarification, and maybe just how you would think about this, how what's different about a young adult novel versus an adult novel? Like, yeah, how do you write differently for that specific genre?
Well, I can tell you a story of when I first picked one up,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I was really struck by the difference. I don't know if you've heard of Twilight, but
Yep.
it's
Yep.
yeah, that super popular young adult fantasy novel that it was just circulating. And I think I was 15 or 16 maybe, and I was just like, oh, this is very silly. I'm not going to read this. And I was kind of in the age where I didn't want to do what everyone else was doing. But then I was at a bookstore and I picked it up and I started reading, and I was just like, I've never been so struck by a book,
Mm-hmm.
that I was just kind of I was with friends, I think, and I just started reading, and I just got in line and I read and I bought the book. Like, I was like, I'm not going home without this.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, like, I know there's probably a variety of opinions about that book. I mean, it has some things in it that we wouldn't all agree with. I mean, there's vampires in it, basically,
Right.
but it wasn't that drew me. It was the writing. Like, I guess I'd never really read a young adult book like that.
Okay.
I mean, it was it's very character driven. I think it
Okay.
usually is a really. I think it's in first person, but it's usually you're just inside the main character's head,
Hmm.
and I think, and it's kind of hard to, in some ways, it's hard to differentiate, because I mean, and setting is usually a big deal too, making it
Okay.
just
Yep.
really like it. You're just supposed to be set down in the story, and I think it
Mm-hmm.
follows the main character more closely. Like, you see them as all their emotions, and are all the important ones anyway, and as they grow. I think adult novels tend to be a little more set back. Like, they look at more of the big picture
Okay.
than a
Yeah.
young adult novel would. I guess a young adult novel is just very immersive. Like, you're right in the story and you're
Okay.
experiencing it. And yeah, I just never read anything quite like that. So
Hmm.
I think ever since then, I would go. Yeah, I go to the library. I bought them. I would just always go and look at the young adult, especially
Hmm.
fantasy section, or science fiction, whatever. Um,
Right.
and that just became my favorite thing to read. But over the years, I was just a reader for a while there, and I was writing my novel, but I think it was more just kind of, it was all for me. Like, I just wanted to write what I wanted to read, which is good. It's good, but I wasn't really thinking about a long-term vision. But then I
Mm-hmm.
remember, I'm not sure how old I was, but I was looking through the young adult section, and I was just getting kind of disgusted, because a lot of them, I mean, this wasn't the Christian, there wasn't really Christian young adult fantasy back then.
Okay.
And I was just getting like really frustrated, like, these books are depressing. Like, sometimes they would end just horribly,
Hmm.
or there would be so much just like graphic violence or something like that, and it was so upsetting to me, because sometimes the writing would be really good, but then there's these things in
Uh,
there that just like jar me, and I remember thinking, like, what if I could write something that's this good, like, that could be put on this shelf, that would actually
hmm.
like bring hope and light into someone's life. Like, there are,
Yeah.
especially girls, but young people reading these books all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, maybe I could write for them. I could write something that draws them in, like, not preachy, not anything,
Mm-hmm.
because that just pushes people away, and make it like a
Mm-hmm.
real magnetic story, but I wouldn't have to have all the things that are offensive, or I could just, yeah, make the theme, or the point of it something meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that kind of where so you talked about developing a vision for your writing and that kind of thing. Is that where it's continued to point to in your writing since then, since kind of that moment?
Yeah, yeah, it's still, it's, I mean, I think it's developed and gotten more, or as I've discovered my voice and who I want to be, and I think it has branched out a little bit, that I enjoy being involved in other parts of publishing, or I've learned that knowing all the people, the network of friends that I have, other authors or editors or whoever, that is a blessing in itself. Like I didn't expect that quite. Just to be friends with them is like, they're really inspiring to me. And I think the Christian, especially fantasy genre, has grown a lot. So there's more space there, and that is due somewhat to Steve Lobby is the agent that I'm pursuing. I've submitted to him before, and he's a huge proponent of Christian speculative fiction, and so and he started a publisher just for that. So I really want him to represent me, because he really believes in Christian fantasy. Although I think my first novel was more explicitly Christian. I mean, it was kind of allegorical, but there was experiences with God, and it was also set over a longer period. But since then, like the novel I'm writing now, it's like they talk about God, but it's not, that's not the point of the novel. Isn't like she comes to Jesus, or it's not, that's not the point of it. It's more discovering more about herself, like maybe one step in moving toward Jesus, because I want to reach as many people as possible. And so it's hard to write about, like explicitly about Jesus and have it be put on just the mainstream shelf. Like it won't be, it'll be put somewhere else.
Yeah. So do you is that a different kind of effectiveness or attempt to reach people with that, or like I can see that there's probably maybe good things about both, because like you talk about that you're not if you write explicitly about it, then you're not going to maybe reach as many people that just wouldn't pick it up or wouldn't get presented to them or that kind of thing. But are there other things besides just the story or the specific, like if you're trying to point someone to God, explicitly writing it into your stories, are there other ways that you think that you can point to God through your writing?
Yeah. Yes, I think so. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, I think that we are, as writers, or writers should write the best story that they can write. And I feel like if I don't make it, if he's given me the ability to, and the ability to learn about it and to grow, if I don't make it like the best, like the most magnetic story, then I'm not bringing him glory. Like that feels, if I write anything in the story that draws the reader out of it, then it's like I've lost the potency of the story. Like if there's something they're like, that doesn't make sense, or that character wouldn't have done that. Because I've experienced that in other books, and it is very frustrating. It's very frustrating if I'm humming along, this is a great story, and then this happens and I just totally don't believe it. Which, I mean, I can't judge. That author may have been doing the best they possibly can, but for me personally, like if I can see that mistake, it feels like I shouldn't make that mistake. Easier said than done. So I think for me, like the way that I want to serve God is it's an art. I'm writing is an art, and I want to do it well as I can. And if I draw people in, because I know other authors that are Christians and their books are not explicitly about God, but I can feel it in their stories. Like the themes that come out are more about hope and forgiveness and breaking free of bondage of your past and things like that. Like, because the theme of the Secret Seller is she's learning that the world is beautiful despite its shadows, like despite the darknesses in it, because she just wants to stay in control and not risk anything. And that kind of comes from my own experience, like, growing up Mennonite and not sure, and then you become an adult and you're not sure where you're supposed to go, or it's so much easier to just stay as you are and not to change anything. So that's kind of my own, I think that makes it come more alive to me, to write my own experiences, and then I'm hoping that will connect to someone else who's also experiencing something similar.
Yeah. And I love the way you describe that, about how important it is to do the best to our ability, and that's going to be different for everyone, like you talk about. But yeah, I think that's so important if we want to bring God to the world, that we do the best that we can in the thing that we're called to. And I think that's great. And just another thing I thought of when you were talking there, I love when you see some kind of art or a book or something presented, and you kind of get the sense that there's something that I really identify, or a truth that's really being brought out, but you don't know anything about the author or the artist, and so you don't know that they're a Christian. But it's already happened to me where I just really appreciate something, and then I find out later that they are a Christian, and it's just it's really neat that it was kind of subtly coming through in their writing or their art of some kind. So yeah, I think that's a really neat and powerful thing. Yeah, if you have more things that come through, or stories from your writing experience and things like that, as we continue to talk here, that's great. But maybe we'll kind of transition into looking a little bit more into your process for writing and that kind of thing. So maybe I'll jump to the third question there in section 3. How would you describe your process of planning, developing, and taking a novel from an idea into its final published form? How's that experience been for you, or how would you describe that?
Well, it has evolved over the years.
Okay, yep.
I started writing in a notebook, and then I got my first laptop, and I think I wrote on our desktop computer too, and then I got my first laptop when I was 16 or 17. And I wrote it on there, and the first novel I wrote, it was just a mess. It just kind of morphed and morphed and morphed.
Yeah.
It was a totally different story pretty much by the end. Like, the main character was a girl. That seemed about the only thing that was the same. But I mean, it was better by the end, but that was a very disorganized way to do it. And I don't really like to outline. I mean, I'm not very organized. It takes effort for me to organize. But I learned after that one, I did not want to repeat that experience, and I decided I was going to do better. And so yeah, go ahead.
If I may just jump in there, do you when you're writing that way, did you have a tough time like keeping track of everything?
Yes.
And keeping the storyline together? Is that kind of what happens?
Yeah, I think what happened was, maybe I could write that way in a couple decades when I'm really skilled at plotting, but I was not very skilled at plotting, and so I just wrote whatever I thought would be cool to happen next.
Okay.
I just kind of I sort of knew how it was going to end, but not. There were a lot of scenes stuck in that didn't even need to be there. Like, I didn't understand a lot of things that I understand now about scenes doing a job and like moving the story forward, and it's not just, you can't just put stuff in because it's funny or because it's cool or whatever. So I've learned so much, like an incredible amount of information since then about how to put scenes together, and I still have much to learn. But I decided, that everything needs to count for this next novel. Actually, after I submitted to Steve Lobby, he recommended that I find a book coach, or I guess she would have been a book coach, a writing coach. And so I did. I found the one that he recommended, and she's very organized, and she's written a dozen books about writing, and she had a workbook that I could go through. So
nice.
I went through that, and I filled in all the questions and all that stuff. And that was a little too much for me. The book was like 100 pages long, and there was just a lot of writing by hand, and the story, again, it was actually hard to keep track of like what I had written at the beginning, and I don't know, it took a lot of time, but I think it was necessary for me to learn how to, she asked all kinds of questions like, what does this character like to do, and what are their, what bad thing happened in their past, and like all these, there's a lot of backstory and that kind of thing. I think it was a very good exercise, but I don't think I need to do that every time.
Okay. Yep.
But I've decided, after I finished that, I just went to using just a notebook, just a plain empty notebook, and I scribble down any thoughts that I need to work on, and I kind of just, after I do each writing session, then I write down my thoughts for the next one. Like, I'm editing at this time, so I usually will like just write down like what do I need to fix for the next time, and I'll work on this, or even if I'm at home and I'm not writing and I think of something, I just quick go write it down in my notebook.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's what I'm going to do. I have another idea. I have lots of ideas floating in my head right now. That's usually how it begins. I'm writing one and another idea is up there tempting me, like just stop and come write this one. So it usually just kind of floats around for several years, actually, until I get to work on it. But that works better if I just kind of let it percolate, and it different characters join in, and I'm like, oh yeah, and then there'll be this person, and they'll do this. And I'm just kind of daydreaming it. But I'm going to try just doing it all in one notebook and not even outlining. I have used Scrivener, which is it's like a novels software. You can outline your novel on there, and I've used that, but it is hard for me to go between that and I write in Microsoft Word usually. It's hard for me to kind of go between them.
Okay.
So I would rather have it written in a notebook, and I can have it right in front of me and then type it in.
Yeah. So before you start writing a novel, how much have you defined the characters or the world or the setting? Like how much of that is created before you even start writing, or does that come together as the story comes together?
Again, that would kind of depend. I mean, it's changed over the two novels that I wrote. The first one, I would walk for hours and think about what they were going to do next. I mean, I thought it all through before I wrote anything down, or not before I wrote anything down. I kind of I did a lot of thinking about it, but I didn't know how to organize it, I think. So the next one, I wrote it in that notebook. I don't know how long. I'm trying to think how long that took me. Probably several weeks to fill it in, the 100-page notebook with all the answer all the questions. And this next time, I think I'm going to. I just took a writing course by an author that I really admire her work. Maggie Stiefvater. She's a young adult author, and she did a writing course. And she's very talented, and she says that she just keeps it all in her head as long as she can, because if she starts writing it down too soon, then she just gets tired of the story, and she can't. She needs to know like what's going to happen. So I think I'm going to try her method and just keep it in my head as long as I can. And then she said once you start to forget things, then you need to start writing it down. So that's what I'm going to try this next time.
Okay, yeah. I guess like so. I was I feel kind of weird asking these questions because I don't have any experience with it. But I like to kind of think as I'm reading a fantasy novel. I'm always kind of curious how much of this has been like built and developed ahead of time. So like I think about like some of the epic fantasy that's being written right now, like Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive. Like I think he said he worked on that for a decade before writing the first book or something like that. So I wondered if it's possible to write something like that without having it mostly planned out, or if from your experience, like with your current novel that you're working on, did you have like is that the one that you planned out, like you wrote in that notebook for a few weeks and things like that? Yeah. So do you have like backstories for characters and things like that? Like, are they somewhat in your mind? Are they people or characters when you get down to writing and working through it?
Yeah, I need them to be real people,
Mm-hmm.
and I think for me to know how to start, I need to understand,
Mm-hmm.
to know, where they should even start. I need to know where they've been and who they are
Yeah.
and why they're getting there. I usually try to take the most main characters, probably 4 or 5 of them, and make sure I have a really good background for them,
Oh yeah.
understanding how they interact with each other. But a lot of times it does develop as I write. Like I get to a scene and I'm
Okay.
maybe halfway through and I'm thinking about, because I'm always trying to make it more, like put more tension in and that kind of thing. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, what if this had happened when she was young or something like that.
Yeah.
So I outline, like I did outline for this last one in Scrivener. I did it, but then I make sure that I have permission to change it. Like, not just because I'm feeling lazy, but because I can see
Yeah.
that something else will work better.
So your characters do change as the writing process goes on?
Yeah, I think they become more three-dimensional. Like
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
try to make them three-dimensional to begin with, but they always
Mm-hmm.
develop more. And there's
Yeah.
also, I don't put in all the specific things like little ticks that they have, or something they carry around with them, or little habits that they have. I often will put those in later,
Oh, okay.
after I've written the rough draft, because there's not really any point in putting those in, because I'll probably have to edit it anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just because that's not really important. Like what's important is getting the plot down and knowing what's going to happen. And then
Yeah.
later I can say, he loved to drink tea and things like that, or
Okay.
have him
Yeah.
drinking tea. And also,
Mm-hmm.
if I see that one of the characters is looking kind of boring, I'm like, okay, well, obviously I'm not being specific enough. I'm not making him really clear and making him come to life. So I need to give him some real human characteristics.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's fascinating to think about, and yeah, I've noticed that already too in novels, that just sometimes those little things that you kind of pick up that a character does in most scenes or something like that, they kind of just brings a little bit more a little bit more out about them, that you get to know them a little better or something like that. So that's really neat. Maybe you have talked about this a little bit, so I don't know if you have more to add on it, or more about your particular experience with it. But um, what is the process like of taking a finished novel, or maybe finishing it and then getting it published, or yeah, from your experience, you said you'd gone trying to go through the traditional route. What are some of the elements of that process?
Well, I think I learned the most, or a good place for me to start was I went to a writers' conference, or several. Um,
Hmm.
American Christian Fiction Writers is a good one. It's a very big one to go to, but and just to kind of mingle with other authors, and then and they have editors and agents there. So agents would be they take on if they like your manuscript, they'll take it on, and then they take it to the publisher. And most
Oh,
of
okay.
the big publishers, like Thomas Nelson or HarperCollins or any of those, you can't just send a manuscript to them. You have to have an agent.
Yeah.
So the agent has, I mean, it's a little bit like a real estate agent or something, but they have like a relationship with the
Hmm.
editors and agents, and so, or with the editors and publishers. And so
Hmm.
if they send something, the editors are like, oh, well, we know you, and you've sent us good stuff before. And it's kind of, it's
Yeah.
like an in.
There's
For
a trust that's built or
Yes.
something.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
something I can't really build that trust because I'm just
Hmm.
the little author.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was a really good experience for me. It's very frightening, but you had a chance to you could get immediate appointments with editors and agents just
Okay.
to
Okay.
pitch your book to them.
Hmm.
And it's very confidence building because you have to get it down to, you have like 10 minutes and you have to get a little blurb about you usually get like get a page, get it designed, a one page or one sheet, I think is what it's called, and it has like
Okay.
your
Yep.
picture, and it has a little graphic about your book, and just a little description, kind of like what I told you, but it would be better worded.
Yeah.
And so then you give them that and they look it over, and then you just have to, they ask you some questions. It's kind of like almost like a job interview or something. They ask you questions and you have to tell them what your book is about. And then if they like it, if they want to see more, they'll ask to see a proposal, which would be like your more biography about you, and then you have a synopsis, which is like a chapter for nonfiction. For fiction, it's just usually like one page where you just tell the book story. It's very hard to write because it's really bad writing. Like you just say, and then this happened, and then this happened. But they want to see, because they want to see how it ends. They want to make sure that you can do the whole thing. And then you have, for most of them, then you would have like your marketing plan. Like, what do you plan to do to help this book get published? Like that's kind of a, I don't mind that part terribly. Some people just really hate that part. Like they don't want to have to go on social media or anything like that.
Oh, okay. So you're kind of, there's an understanding that you're going to do some promotion of the book and that kind of thing too? Yeah,
and that's something that's changed. Like it used to not be that way. It used to be just you send in your book and then they send it around for you. And I think that's because there's so much competition, and the publishers they can't really keep up. And so if you tell them that you're willing to help them out with that, then you're just a better candidate then, because it's they're not just considering your book, they're considering you as an author. Like, are you gonna be a good investment? I think.
Yeah.
Okay, now what was I saying? Oh yeah, that I gave them a proposal.
Yeah,
so I didn't get any. The first one I went to, I don't think anyone was very interested, but it was just really good for me to meet them and actually talk about my book, like in an official capacity. And I've been to a few more since then. And I think the last, was it the last time I submitted to that agent, Steve Lobby, he said that he said that I should maybe just not go to conferences and use that money instead to pay for the book coach, or the writing coach. And so I did that, and I decided that, you know what, I think I've learned what I can for now at the conferences, like until I get my agent. Like I've made a fair amount of contacts and networked with some authors. I would like to just get an agent, and then I can go back to the conferences, and then I can mingle with. So even if I have an agent, I would still need to go and pitch to publishers, maybe. They still want to talk to me, and so that was a really good way for me to get a foot into the publishing world. I've dabbled a little bit. I did self-publish an ebook, a collection of short stories called Stories of the Stars. That was just kind of an experiment to see what happened, and I didn't really promote it that much. So I think it paid for it, like what I paid for the cover and stuff like that, but it's not like a moneymaker. So I actually made it. I put it on. You can get it for free if you sign up for my newsletter. Just as a reader magnet, or for readers to see a little bit of my writing. But I have then I've published some short stuff like flash fiction and some articles with Daughters of Promise and that kind of thing. But yeah, that's pretty much the extent of my publishing.
Yeah. Would you ever consider self-publishing a novel, or is that not something you could be convinced to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe if I would be trying this for a long time yet, and it wouldn't be getting any bites, I might think about it again. But right now, I just don't. It's just so hard to make a splash with self-publishing. Like, I feel like I'd have to really enjoy it, and I'd have to be more business-minded. Like, I just don't really enjoy. I don't mind doing some promotion, but to be the sole person responsible for it would be just not really worth it for me. It would be a lot of time that I would spend not writing. And so I would much prefer to have a big publisher, or actually it doesn't have to be a big publisher, but just a decent publisher to take it, and they can have part of the money. That's fine with me. I want people to read the story. And that feels like the best way to get them to read the story. So
I guess I probably have no idea the amount of work that that goes into getting a book published besides just the writing. Like you talk about, like you mentioned the word business there. And it's, yeah, I guess I haven't thought about how much of a business it is to get a book on the shelf and to convince people to read it too, I guess is the thing, and until you become an established author and have your maybe set of readers and that kind of thing. I can see how that would be a lot of work to do on your own. So yeah, I can see why the goal would be to be published there.
Yeah, and that's I think my dream is to have readers that trust me or trust my books. I mean, I have authors that I trust, and I just will buy their book or read their book, no questions asked, because I know it's going to be good. And that's what I want to do, and to build trust in readers, and and then try not to let them down.
Yeah, yeah. Are you gonna keep writing novels and keep working on it even if you wouldn't be successful in getting published?
I probably would. Yeah, I mean, there are authors who've written or who took 15 years to get published. Like I know
Yeah.
one, Susan Meissner. I mean, she doesn't write my genre, but I think it took her 15 years, and she's now
Wow.
very popular and very successful. Like,
Hmm.
it just, I don't know. Sometimes it's just how the market is. Like, it's not that you're such a bad writer. It's just that it's not the
Yeah.
right time. Like, timing is,
Yeah.
and they're not taking that kind of book right now or whatever.
Yeah.
They have too many of that kind of author. It depends on a lot of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, there are factors there besides just the quality of the writing, I guess. But I'm just so impressed when I hear stories like that of the dedication and someone that sticks at it until they are successful and able to get books published. But then it makes me think too, are there people that have been writing for years and years that we've never heard of that just keep trying and their books have never gotten published, or they're just on a computer somewhere or on a file somewhere, and the world's never seen it. There probably are a lot of those out there.
There probably are. It does seem, though, like I'm not sure how to say it, but I mean, I love writing so much, and
Mm,
the more I learn about it, the more I love it. And so,
mm,
like, it is just one of the best things that I've ever done.
mm,
I mean, it doesn't feel like that all the time, but when I look back at the whole, like, it is so fun and so fulfilling, and it feels like a way to grow more in God's image, like, to be creative. Um, and I think that when someone loves writing that much, like, it feels like eventually it'll come through. Like, I've heard agents say that too. Like, when someone loves
mm,
writing that much, like, they have what it takes to get better, at least. Like, because they want to see, even if my writing was bad or if it was needed a lot of work, if they see that I'm willing, like, I love it and I'm willing to work and work to fix it, then they'd be more likely to take me on than someone who is even better, but who is like, I'm not gonna, or who's lazy or just didn't really
yeah,
care. Like, the passion,
yeah,
I think, does come through.
yeah,
So hopefully, if those people sitting in their basements writing, or wherever they are writing, if they have enough passion, that hopefully it'll come through someday for them.
yeah.
And
Well, yeah, if they're doing it, for anyone that's doing it for years and years, they must have something driving them
yeah,
there. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's great. And yeah, I really hope that you are successful with this one or a future one if that's not the case. Maybe in the last few minutes here, looking at some of the other things that you've done with your writing, and so I was looking over your website a little bit. How do you use your website, or what's the purpose of your website and how it fits into your vision for your writing?
yeah, it's just kind of like a landing page or a home base for me as an author. I mean, it's a place I want people to be able to put my name in and find me. Like, that's pretty important,
Yeah.
because I do that when I'm looking at, I hear an author's name or someone recommends them, I'm going to look them up and see. And so I want to have something there. It's a place people can sign up for my newsletter there. And the newsletter would be more personal. I send them updates. I
Okay.
mean, they get the free ebook, and then will send them any news that I have. So they would, like, my newsletter subscribers would be the first to find out if I got published or where I was in the process.
Yeah.
And then I post flash fiction on there. It's
Okay.
not quite every Friday, but I try to.
Is that the same thing that's on your Instagram?
Yeah,
or?
yeah. I post it on my
okay.
Instagram and then I move it over after, or
Okay.
sometimes
Yep.
the same day. But yeah, that way I just want to have some samples of my writing on there so they can see it. And then also I have, I think it's under the Stories I'm Writing tab. I have information about the novels that I'm working on. I have the Secret Cellar, and then the one I had written before, Seal Up the Stars. There is actually a sequel that I had started writing it. So maybe someday I will finish those. But there's information there, and then I have links to the Pinterest boards that I use for inspiration.
Okay, yeah. Do you put up any ideas on there for future novels, or do you keep those to yourself until you know if they're going to be developed or not?
I keep those secret, or I think you can make the board secret until I'm actually like working on it. Just because I don't know. I mean, it could be I might not work on it for decades or something like that. I don't know for sure. But once I'm working on it, then I put it up just so people can see what I'm working on, and yeah. But I start the boards usually before. It feels like research, kind of. It's like a fun research to do, just to find a few pictures of what I'm thinking of, and I'm very visual art. Usually connects me to what's in my head. I mean, it's a good way to inspire myself.
So you'll look for images and things like that to kind of help develop, I don't know, props or settings and that kind of thing?
Yeah, like for the Secret Cellar, the setting is really big in that novel. The Night Bazaar is, I kind of based it off of Florence in Italy. I was there one time, and it was just a very magical city. Like, it was so beautiful, and the atmosphere was just fantastic, and people were so nice. And I just loved it. And so I kind of vaguely base it off of that. Like, I mean, it's a fantasy world, but I think it feels more real when it's anchored in a real culture somewhere. And then that gives me kind of research ideas. Like, I looked into the families that used to live there, and they used to have this rivalry, and that kind of comes out in my story.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
But then the Night Bazaar, which it's an underground market, that it's actually the same name as I was in Thailand at Igo years ago, and they have a Night Bazaar. It's in Chiang Mai. It's just a market that opens at night. And it's also very magical. And there's just like stalls along the side of it. They close down the street, and then you can just walk along. And there's, singers and food and just whatever you want. And I just loved it. And so I thought, what if I put this into my story that I'm working on? I made it more, I mean, it's actually magical. Like, they're selling magical wares, but it's kind of that idea.
Yeah, that's great. I love hearing the stories of where the ideas for novels and stories come from. So that's great to hear. Back to your website, I was going over it a little bit, and something that stuck out to me, I think, because of this podcast project that I'm doing, is I found a few interviews that you've done. Where did that idea come from, or what inspired that?
Yeah, I think I was very, I'm trying to remember which year it was that I started, but I was very passionate about people inspiring creativity in others. And I kept hearing, I think it was, we were living in Arkansas, and we were going to my husband's church, and people would talk to me about writing, and then they would say, oh, I could never do that, or like, I'm just not creative. And it just, I was like, yes, you are. It's actually kind of similar to what you're doing here, because you're finding expertise in lots of areas, not just like art and writing and music. Like, those are the ones that people think of, but there's so many ways to be creative, and that's basically where it came from. I think Made to Create just came to my mind, and I decided to start it up, and I enjoy doing the written interviews more, so that was really fun. Like, I got to talk to all kinds of people, or email them anyway, and just connect with them. And I hope someday that I can do it again. I would actually like to move it to its own website someday.
Okay.
I've looked into that. I would love for it to be like a, I don't know, like a creative database for Anabaptist people, especially, like a place for them to find whatever they need in the creative world. But I know it would just take a lot of work, and I'm not sure when I can do it, but it's on my back burner.
Okay, excellent. Is it something you've kind of taken a pause from, or have you still been doing those interviews?
I have, yeah. I just
Okay.
I just didn't really have the time to do it at that point.
That's the thing with great ideas is they take a lot of time.
Yes.
You can only do so many of them.
Yeah.
Is what I find out. So yeah, no, that I really liked it and was struck by it when I came across it. So that's why I wanted to ask you about it. Maybe just you kind of alluded to it when you were talking about that those interviews that you had done, but it's you seem to find it important to want to inspire others to find beauty and maybe be creative themselves or come up with some kind of creation. Do you have anything more to say about that, or why you find it important to want to inspire others in that?
Yeah. I think it's part of who we are as being made in God's image, and I think that it opens us up. It opens our understanding to Him as a creator. When we create and feel that joy of pure creativity. It can be so many things. You can bake a perfect loaf of bread and feel pure joy that it worked out. Yeah. And I know that we often don't, especially those who don't think they're creative, they don't pause and marvel at this. But I think it's something that we should do. We should pause and marvel that we can create this. So how much more creative is God if He could make us and then we can create? It really blows my mind that He could be so creative that everything He creates is creative. It's amazing. And so I would like to, encourage people to just stop and think about what they're doing and how is it creative. We automatically find the best ways to do things, and you can be an organization genius, you can be all kinds of things, and just to make the world more beautiful around us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love the description you give there of the joy that we feel when we create something, and I think part of that is that being created to create, that we're truly doing what we are truly who we are meant to be when we are creating or something like that. And I wonder if people sometimes associate pride with it and will kind of squelch that feeling of joy that's a perfectly good thing, because they're worried about pride or something like that. So I like your encouragement there to just enjoy that feeling of joy that comes from creating something beautiful.
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen that. Are people being worried about being proud, but it makes me sad if they squelch it, because I think it should be praise to God. Like, that joy should just turn to praise, and it feels like we're cheating Him out of praise if we do something beautiful and then we just don't feel anything about it, or just push it away. He's waiting. He would like to feel praise. He wants our praise, and so it's not right to Him to not let our joy go back to Him.
Yeah, that's great. Just before we wrap it up here, do you have any advice that you'd like to share with those that are maybe starting out in writing or are thinking of becoming a writer and trying it out for their own? Anything you'd like to say to them?
First, probably read a lot. Read what makes you love writing. I think that's really important to learn, and read good writing to learn how to do it, and to keep yourself inspired, and also find an outlet for your writing. I think you might just want to write for yourself, but if you want to push yourself and you want to get better, I would find you could pitch to Daughters of Promise, or you could write flash fiction. I mean, there's several online flash fiction magazines. It's very easy to submit to. You just follow their instructions and you write a little story. I mean, read some examples first so you know what you're doing. But something like that, it doesn't take that long, especially the flash fiction is less than 1,000 words. So for me, it doesn't take that long to come up with the little idea. I mean, you want to edit it and things. But if you just try it, even if you get a no, you've done it. Like you've taken a step toward being a better writer and being more serious about it. I think that made a big difference for me, was just to take the step and just face some rejection and be okay with that and just accept it as something that's helping me grow. It's making me, I can do better next time.
Yeah, that's great, and it's amazing how it can sometimes be the start of something by just taking that first step of trying it or trying to submit a piece of writing or something like that. So I really like that advice. Do you have any advice for those looking to expand their reading, or just you talked about reading is really important with writing too, but any advice for things to read or things to try reading if you want to expand your reading?
Yeah, you could, do what I do, which is I try to read something. I have certain books that I gravitate toward, but I try to just kind of throw in, I don't read nonfiction as much, so sometimes I try to just read one a month or something like that.
Okay.
I also have, like in the morning, if I read scripture for a while, then I usually have like an inspirational, sometimes it's something heavier, like I'm reading one by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I think, right now. And I just read a certain amount every day because it keeps me in that kind of, scriptural way of thinking. Or I feel like I'm connected to God and my mind is clear. And so that's a good time for me to read something like that, rather than like waiting until in between doing dishes and laundry or whatever and just plopping down. I mean, that could work too, but it's just like, that's when my mind is so clear and I have time. My kids usually sleep in, so that works. But whatever works for you. I mean, you have to find a time to fit it in. But also, I ask if you know someone who also loves to read but reads different things. Like my husband, he reads more nonfiction and history and that kind of thing. So I'll ask him for recommendations sometimes, and it works out. I think it's always worked out because he knows me pretty well, and so he knows what kind I would like. So. Yeah,
well, that's great, and thanks for sharing what you have, your stories and experience, and also some things that you've learned and some tips and that kind of thing too. And also, I enjoyed hearing the ideas that you shared about creativity and how that's part of our relationship with God and that kind of thing too. I really appreciated that. Just before we do wrap it up here, where can people find you if they want to read your things, or what do you is there anything that you want to say about where people can find you, or other things you want to promote?
Yeah, I love interacting with people on Instagram, Sheri Yutzy author, and I post about books I'm reading, sometimes book reviews, or I also post flash fiction on there, and just kind of it's a little glimpse into my life. And also on my website, sheriyutzy.com, you can find more information about me and my stories, and you can sign up for my newsletter there and get a free ebook collection. It's 7 stories. They're all science fiction or fantasy.
Excellent. Anything else yet that you wanted to say before we sign off?
I don't think so. It's been fun.
All right. Good. Thanks again for doing this. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Sheri, for sharing your knowledge with us. I really enjoyed the entire conversation. I found it very inspiring to hear her descriptions of her stories, talking about where she came up with the idea and how she developed as a writer and wants to continue to develop and get better and to eventually see her works published. So I found that very inspiring. I Also appreciated her desire to help others to find their creativity, to share beauty and hope with the world, but also to find the joy that comes from creating something and to being who we are meant to be. So yeah, thanks again, Sheri, for inspiring and sharing with us. If you want to find out more about this episode, including some links to some of the websites or different ways to reach Sheri that she talked about, you can go to the podcast website, which is everydayexpertise.ca. If you want to contact me for any reason, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or you have a suggestion for someone else, or you want to just give me general feedback on what you have been liking or about the podcast or what you'd like to be better, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at contact@everydayexpertise.ca. That's all for now. Join me again next week to learn from the expertise of everyday people.